Hello, thanks for purchasing one of our uRepair do-it-yourself kits. We prepared this video to help you go through the process of repairing your iPhone in an easy and safe way. All you have to do is follow the step-by-step instructions. So let's start by showing you how to open your device.
Hey, what's up guys? I am an expert and today we will be working on an iPhone 4G. First thing and foremost, you want to ensure that your workstation is properly organized and that we have all the tools for the job. Starting here, we have our set of screwdrivers, followed by various prying tools, some tweezers, our plastic spudger, we have a little suction cup, and our SIM card eject pin. Up here we have our magnetic map. This map will ensure that we don't lose or mix up any of the screws. Here we have this decal. We're going to be installing this on the screen to avoid any kind of injury, basically like cutting ourselves. And finally, we have our replacement screen. So let's go ahead and install the decal first by removing the paper backing. Right, so you're going to align it as best as possible. Then we're going to get our spudger, basically just run it along the top of the display. Next step, we're going to be removing both of the pentalobe screws located on the bottom of the device. We're going to be using our pentalobe screwdriver, which basically looks like a 5-pointed star. Let's go ahead and remove both of the screws. If it's difficult for you to actually find the screw itself at the tip of the screwdriver, go ahead and use your finger as leverage in order to help you guide the tip of the screwdriver and also to avoid scratching the device. Now every time that we remove a screw, we will be placing it on the map in order to avoid mixing them up or losing them. Now that we have removed both of the screws, we're going to be using our thumbs to press on the back panel and push it upwards like so. And then we're going to have a little lid sticking out on the top, and then we're going to be lifting up from there like so to be able to gain access to the inside of the device. Alright, place this aside. Okay, now the first step that we're going to do here is disconnect the battery. If you're doing a replacement for the battery, this is the step that you're going to basically get to in order to do so. So you're going to remove one single screw holding the connector for the battery. Is a Phillips head screw. And then we're going to place it aside. Now using our spudger, on the plate itself you have this little square ledge on top. Using the flat side, you're going to pry that up to disconnect the connector. Hold it towards the inside of the battery. Now using our tweezers, we're going to pick up this little black grounding clip that is lying underneath the connector. Make sure you don't lose this. Okay, so we have disconnected the battery. The next step is basically to remove it. You actually have this little paper here, this little vinyl sheet that you have lying underneath the battery. This is to pull up the battery, but I don't tend to use it as half the time it always breaks. So we're going to be using our guitar pick. We're going to insert it right there, and we're going to be using this to pry the battery out of the frame. Alright guys, now once you actually have created a gap, you're just going to go ahead and lift it up. Here we have the battery. So we're going to be reinstalling this battery later on, but if you're doing a battery replacement, this is the steps that you're going to follow in order to get the battery out of the device and reinstall the new battery. Now in order to reinstall the new battery, you're going to be replacing the little grounding clip that we removed earlier. Okay, this little grounding clip. You're going to go ahead and place it where it belongs, and then connect the battery connector first, and then drop the battery in place. Alright, so moving on. Now the next step, we're going to disconnect the little service antenna, which is this little black cable that you see running on top of the loudspeaker, and then it has a little gold or silver end. Now, using the tip of the spudger, we're going to insert it underneath the cable itself. You don't want to pry on the actual metal bracket because you could break it. So just insert it on the tip underneath it, and basically just gently pry it up. And now we fold it towards the bottom of the device to keep it out of the way. Alright, so the next step is basically fold this and adhere it to the adhesive line that was lying underneath the battery. Again, we're just trying to keep everything out of the way here, like that. We're going to be removing the shield that protects the dock connector flex. So it's 2 Phillips head screws. Place those aside. Remember guys, follow your map so you don't mix them up. Alright, now let's go ahead and lift this up. Place that aside. Now again, using the tip of our spudger, we're going to be inserting it below the flex. We're going to pry it up gently. This flex is actually still, basically is adhered to the motherboard itself. So we're going to peel it back. Once you reach this little turn here, you're going to fold it outwards. You do not want to pull on it as you could break it, and this basically is your dock connector, so the flex keeps on going underneath your loudspeaker. Alright, so next we're going to remove the EMI shield. We have 5 screws. They are all different sizes, so make sure you don't mix this up. The order that you remove them on doesn't really matter. Just make sure that you place them in the correct location on your map in order so you don't mix them up. You don't want to install the wrong screws in the wrong location. If you do so, you could actually damage the motherboard. Alright, we have the longest screw here. Alright, that one actually took some work to get it out. Alright, so we have removed all the screws on here. Now, the next step is to remove the shield itself. It has 2 hooks. Rotate the device so you can see them. It has 2 hooks, one right here and one on this side. Now in order to actually remove this, what we're going to do is we're going to lift from the top. And once you actually get this little clip that is basically a grounding clip for your Wi-Fi antenna, once you actually get it out of the gap that it's sitting in, we're going to rotate the EMI shield and push it downwards towards the connector, the dock connector, in order to release both of the hooks. You have them right there. Sure you can see them. This one and that one. Alright, so place the shield aside. Now we're going to be disconnecting the flexes. We'll start by removing the digitizer, inserting the flat end of your spudger right beneath the flex. You don't want to dig in there, you're just going to literally insert the edge and give it a light twist. Again on this one, same thing. Now up here we have the 3 flexes for the power button, front facing camera, and your volume controls and headphone jack. So let's go ahead, just use the tip this time. Disconnect one by one. Alright, and finally, using the flat end again, We're going to insert it to disconnect battery connector. Just use the corner of it. Disconnect the flex, and now we're able to lift off the camera from the location that it sits in. The reason why I wanted to disconnect all the flexes before is, as you can see, the rear camera has this little leg sticking out. We don't want to break it or bend it. So place that aside. Make sure you don't place this on your magnetic map. Alright, so we have removed basically all the connectors. Now we're going to go ahead and start removing the screws that hold the motherboard in place. We have 3 screws. One that sits underneath this little white circle here, which that is a watermark. If it's red, obviously your phone has been wet inside. Make sure that they're white. We have the standoff screw here. Then we have a Phillips head here. Now this one and this one are both Phillips heads. In order to remove this one, you don't necessarily have to remove the little white sticker on top. I tend not to do it. We're just going to basically center the screwdriver in the middle and press down on it, and then we'll be able to remove the screw. Like so. Now place the screws aside. Remove the other Phillips heads on the bottom. This one is holding down your motherboard and your loudspeaker at the same time. Now we're going to be using the flathead screwdriver, and we're going to be removing the standoff up here. There we go. Placing this one aside as well. Alright, now we removed all of the screws, and we're missing one thing to be able to remove the motherboard. Now we're going to go ahead and, using our jack pin, we're going to insert it in the little hole for the SIM card tray. Press on it and lift the SIM tray out of the location that it sits in. And now we're able to remove the motherboard. Starting from the bottom, you're going to literally just lift it up. Always from the bottom, you don't want to lift up from the top. Press down on the flexes to move them out the way. And then you're going to rotate. Basically, you're going to rotate the motherboard towards the inside of the device in order to remove it. We're going to place this one aside as well. Okay, so now let's remove the loudspeaker. We have 1 screw remaining. Also a Phillips head. Go ahead and place this one aside as well. To remove the loudspeaker, we're going to lift up from the innermost part of it. We're basically going to lift up in an angle, like so, and lift it away. That's going to be the same way that you're going to reinstall it in an angle and place it in the device. Now, we're getting close to removing the screen. Now we're going to remove your vibrator that is in the top corner here, in the top right corner. It has 2 screws, 2 different screws. The one on the left is a very long screw, as you can see. Place this one aside. Don't mix it up with any of the other screws. Make sure that you're following your map. I will have a small screw here. Go ahead and remove it. Place it aside. Now we could go ahead and remove your vibrator. Basically your vibrator right there. Alright, so now all we have left to be able to remove our screen from the device is 10 screws. We have 4 screws, 1 in each corner, and we're going to be removing these. And then we have 6 screws in the inside of the frame, 3 in each side. The ones on the inside of the frame, basically on the side walls, we're not going to remove them. We're just going to loosen them by giving them a full turn or 2 half turns. And then we're going to leave them inside of the device. So let's begin by removing the screws in the corner. All right, that's the fourth one. Now we're going to go ahead and loosen the 6 screws. Now we're going to keep this out of the way, so we're going to fold it to the inside of the device and try to adhere it to the inside of the frame. So 2 half turns, 1, 2. Same thing on all the screws. The reason why we're doing just half turns is these screws are kind of difficult to reinstall if you do fully remove them. So that's the reason for leaving them in place. Alright, so we're going to be using our guitar pick to remove the screen. Now that we have all the screws loose and we have the four screws holding the screen removed, we're going to go ahead and turn your display to the top side, and we're going to use our guitar pick here. We're going to insert it on each side, doesn't matter which side, but between the aluminum frame and the plastic frame for the screen. It could be difficult if your display is badly broken, as there is adhesive on the bottom portions on each side of the home button, and then you have some adhesive on top as well. So let's go ahead and do this. Break the adhesive bond. If you do have the bottom of the screen broken and you have glass basically staying on the adhesive itself, don't worry about it. We'll be removing that adhesive in order to remove all the residue of glass. Alright, so now you have created this little gap, as you can see here. We're going to go ahead and lift up by hand to finish removing the rest of the screen. Alright, like so. Don't fully remove the screen, as your cables are still basically inside of the device, as you can see here. In order to remove them, we're going to be rotating the screen. All right. And then you get this, basically the screen with the flexes intact out of the frame itself. All right, so we have the broken screen here, the frame assembly. Now you see the adhesive on the bottom, each side of the home button, and then you have some on top. If your screen was to be broken and you do have glass residue on here, you want to make sure that this glass residue is removed. You want everything to be perfectly clean in order for your new screen to sit flush with your frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace this adhesive. Okay. First thing what we're going to do is we're going to remove the adhesive here using our little wedge tool. Basically, just try to pry it off as best as possible. Get a little corner, lift it up, like so. And then you're able to pull it up. Alright, as you can see, this is a whole adhesive strip. Okay, so let's go ahead and remove the other one on the opposite side. Same thing, using your little wedge tool. Try to lift up a little corner. Then lift it up by hand. Make sure you don't damage your home button. Alright. So as you can see, your home button is actually basically attached to your frame for your device. Totally different from iPhone 4S's, where the button is actually attached to the screen display, and to the display assembly, I'm sorry. Alright, now let's go ahead and remove the one on top. Basically the same process for all of the 3 adhesives that you see here. Alright, there we go. Place this aside. If you do have any sort of residue or glue or any kind of dirt, perfect time to basically clean it off. I like to use my little wedge tool to basically just guide it along all edges. to make sure that we have a nice flush fitment with the new display. Okay, so now we're going to be installing the display. But before we do so, this little gold see-through ring that you see here should be attached to the back of your original screen. Now, in some rare cases, the bond from this breaks and it stays attached to the frame of the device, as you saw on my repair. If it's not, it should be located right here. So using the flat side of your spud, you're basically just gonna break the bond, removing it, and then you're gonna basically just place it inside of the little gap that is created around the front-facing camera, like so, to make sure that your front-facing camera is always centered.
Alright, how are you doing so far? Once you've opened your phone, now you're ready for replacing the broken LCD screen for the new one. Oh, and don't forget that we can recycle your old screen. Just look inside your box and find the envelope that you can use for shipping your screen back to us at no cost. In exchange for that, you can even choose one free gift among the options, like a tempered glass protector or a car charger for your phone. Let's see now how to replace your broken screen.
So now that we have this basically cleaned off, we're going to get ready to install our new screen, and then we have our adhesive to replace. Now let's go ahead and peel the paper backing from here. Align it as best as possible. And just press it down to make sure that you're making a good bond. Next side. Alright. Obviously, we're going to remove the pieces that we don't need from the adhesive. It has some little cutouts here. So using the tip of our spudger, I'm going to press those in and then remove them from the opposite side. And place those aside. Now we have this second adhesive. Alright. Now moving on to the top one. The top one here is actually broken into numerous adhesive strips. We have actually 3 pieces on here. For some reason, it should be different, and depending on the model phone that you get, it'll probably be 2 pieces or 1 piece. But that doesn't really matter. Just make sure that you replace this adhesive. Okay. All right. So we have the last piece here. Now just use your little wedge tool or the flat side of your spudger and go around, make sure that everything is pressed in properly. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the paper backing for this. Okay, now that we have installed the sensoring ring and then we have reinstalled the adhesive, we're going to go ahead and install the screen. Removing it from a bubble wrap, placing it to the side. Let's go ahead and remove the anti-static backing that it comes with. Now, in order to actually reinstall the screen, we're going to do the same thing that we did removing it. We're going to insert both of the flexes, and then we're going to rotate the screen. Now, as you can see, the flexes are going through the little cutout that the phone has. We're going to make sure that the full flex goes through. You do not want anything to stay behind, as you could damage them. So make sure that the flex, you're going to see a flex that is always going to be basically bowing. As you can see, this little flex right there. I'm going to press it down. Basically, pressing them down is kind of nearly impossible since we're going to be closing this part of the display. So what you're going to do is you're going to press it down from this side. So it's going to go in and you're going to keep both of them together. What we're looking for is that both of the flexes are always the same length. So go ahead and bring them down. You're going to basically press them down like so as you guide the display in position. All right, so this is the mistake that a lot of people make. This flex here stayed behind. Now, you do not want to pull on it, and obviously you want them to be the same size. So what we're going to do is we're going to reopen the screen, and then we're going to make sure that both of them are the same length. So let's go ahead and do it the proper way. Pull back the display, making sure that they're the same length, and guide them through. As you can see, now they are the same length. And the top of your display is perfectly flush with the frame. This is the two things that you're looking for. Once this is flush, these two have to be the exact same length. If not, you have to redo what I just did. Okay, so now we're going to sit the side clips into the frame. The proper way to do it is we're going to always do the ones that are facing the top in order to actually clear the screw and the washer that are right there. So let's go ahead and put the ones that are on top now. Holding this in place, we're going to rotate the device. And again, we're going to do this side now. Okay. Alright, so you see, two of the screws actually fell. That means that I did more than 2 half turns. So we're going to go ahead and reinstall those. Alright. Okay. So now the display is flush with my frame. Let's go ahead and reinstall the screws. Before we do so, let's go ahead and tighten the ones that are still attached to the frame. Go ahead and tighten them. Now when we're tightening any screws inside of the vise, when your screwdriver stops turning, you don't want to keep on going, as you could strip the screw itself. So let's try and avoid that as best as possible. Alright, so we have one washer, 2 screws. The second washer is still over here. Go ahead and take it out. Now the easiest way to do this is you're going to pick up the screw, just pinch it, pick up the washer, set it on top of the screw, put them together. Now with your screw, since it's magnetic, both of the things are going to stay together. And go ahead and reinstall this onto the device. Same thing for the other one. Just pick up the screw, pinch it, and drop the washer on top of the screw and align it onto the tip of the screwdriver. And this will happen to some of you guys, so just follow this, and reinstalling everything should be a breeze. Alright, so we tightened the 6 screws on the sides, right? Okay, now we tighten the 6 screws on the sides. We're going to go ahead and reinstall the 4 screws to go on the corners. The 4 screws that go on the corners obviously are the exact same size. But if you're following your map, you should be reinstalling them in the appropriate location, so you shouldn't worry about mixing them up. All right. Last one for the corners.
Well, your repair is almost done. All you need to do now is reassemble your phone. So, did you think the repair was too easy for you? Maybe you have a natural talent for that. How about making some money with this? Yes, you can do just like me and join the iExperts, a community of repair specialists. Want to know how? Visit www.becomeaniexpert.com and be welcome to your new future. Now, let's see the last part of this video.
All right, so we have reinstalled this 10 screws that hold down the display. Before we move on, we always want to make sure that the frame and the screen are both basically perfectly flush. If you have any gap anywhere, you're going to go back and loosen the screws on that side, or if you have to, you're going to have to remove all the screws again. But make sure that it's flush. Easy way to make sure of that is when you're tightening the screws, you're going to press down on the display and then tighten them. And this, you should ensure, this will ensure that it will be flush with the frame. All right, so we have done so. Let's go ahead and move on to reinstalling the vibrator. So basically, just pick it up, drop it in position, and let's start with the small screw first. Installing the small screw first will basically help us align the hole for the long screw. So go ahead and basically just hold on your vibrator and tighten the small screw. And before you finish tightening it, just use your screwdriver here to align the hole for the big screw and finish it off. Move on to the big one, pinch it, and basically just align it onto the tip of your screwdriver and guide it into position. And there we go. Now we're going to go ahead and install the loudspeaker. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, the way to install this is basically you're going to install it in the same angle and manner that you removed it. Just go ahead and remove the dock connector flex here, fold it outward, and let's guide this in. Same way that we removed it. Alright, so what we're looking for here is when we install this, it has 4 little metal clips right there. We're looking that these little clips fall into the little ledge that you see this is going to sit inside of. So basically just pressing it as far back as it goes, and we're going to be pressing down on it. Don't press down too hard as you could damage them. Before you press down on it, you're going to use the flat end of your spudger and push these little clips in as you're basically keeping tension on it. And there we go. Now it should be flush. Now as I'm holding it down, we're going to go ahead and basically reinstall the screw that goes on the right side. Now I'm holding it down, so I'm going to basically just pinch the screw here and reinstall it. Now this is kind of tricky since we still have to hold this side down. Meanwhile, we reinstall the motherboard, because the motherboard it has the bottom portion of the motherboard, and it's what holds down the loudspeaker. Remember that single screw holds both of the things down. So now we're going to make sure we have the motherboard here. We're going to make sure that the flexes are out the way. The service antenna is out the way, as these things are usually what gets in the way. Now to install this, the motherboard on top right here, right next to where that screw goes, you see a little hole. It's an alignment hole. You have a little alignment pin right there. So when we reinstall this in the same manner that we removed it in an angle, see, in an angle, you're going to rotate it into place. All right. As this little corner here is going to be on the way, so you have to rotate it in order to actually clear the frame itself. So let's go ahead and rotate it and start lowering it. All right, make sure that all flexes are out the way. So now that you basically installed it and it's aligned properly, now all you have to do is hold on the motherboard, and we're going to reinstall that single screw down there on the bottom left. Okay, there we go. So now you can let go of everything. Now we're going to move on to reinstalling the rest of the screws that hold on the motherboard. Let's begin by the standoff that goes on top. Remember that the standoff, we removed it with the flathead screwdriver. We're going to tighten it with the flathead screwdriver, but just to make it easier for ourselves to reinstall this, we're going to use the Phillips. Drop it in place, give it a few turns. It's not going to tighten it properly, as it's basically just going to keep on rotating inside of the standoff. So that's when we move on to the flathead to basically just finish tightening it like that. All right, now we have one more screw, which is the one that has that little watermark on top of it. This one pretty much. Just go ahead and align it on the tip of your screwdriver. And do the same thing. Screwdriver stops turning, you stop tightening it. Alright, so now what we have to do is we're going to go ahead and reinstall the rear facing camera, which goes right here. We're going to go ahead and connect it before we move on to reconnecting the rest of the flexes. So let's go ahead and drop it into position. It goes in an angle, like so. And to look for the socket, what we're going to do is basically you're just going to put your finger on top of it and kind of move it back and forth, side to side. And whenever you feel that it stops moving, then you could gently press on it. Feel for that click. Now we're able to lower the LCD cable first. Doing the same thing. We're going to look for that, for it to stop moving. Like, there we go. And then click. And the same thing for pretty much every other flex. We're basically ensuring that we're not going to damage the sockets or the flex itself. Now basically these things are pretty much aligned, so you just have to lower them and basically reconnect them. Alright, there we go. So since we're reconnecting flexes, let's go ahead and reconnect all the flexes at the same time. Let's go ahead and do the service antenna. This one is a little bit tricky since it's so small, and basically it's made in a specific length for that socket. So let's go ahead and basically just align it, and with your fingernail you're going to press on it gently. And then let's move on to the dock connector. After you connect the dock connector, you're going to go ahead and literally just run your finger along the flex itself to re-adhere it to the motherboard. Now that we have connected all the flexes, let's go ahead and reinstall the shield. Now the shield itself, remember, it has two hooks. In order to reinstall this is actually fairly easy. Just drop it into position and lower the little grounding clip for the Wi-Fi antenna here. You just press on it and it clips on. Way easier than when you're removing it. Let's go ahead and reinstall all the screws. I tend to do all the smaller screws before the long screw to ensure that the hole for the long screw is properly aligned. Okay. Now guys, if during the removal process you placed all your screws in the appropriate location on your map, you shouldn't have any problem reinstalling the screws or finding the location where they go. That's basically what the map is for. And it does help you in the reinstalling process. Okay, there we go. EMI shield reinstalled. Now we're going to install the backing plate for the dock connector. Now it is not a perfect rectangle, so it does have a little cutout on the bottom left. This is for this little pin that you see right here is actually the screw for the SIM card eject bracket. So go ahead and make sure that the little cutout on the plate itself is right next to that little pin. Just align it with the screws, the screw holes, and let's go ahead and hold it down as you reinstall the first screw. And then align it again, hold it down once more, and reinstall the second screw. Okay, so now let's go ahead and remove this little vinyl sticker or film from the adhesive for the battery and fold it back into position. We're going to go ahead and reinstall the little grounding clip for the battery connector. Drop it into position. Now we're going to go ahead and reinstall the battery. Now remember, if you guys were doing a battery replacement, all you have to do is disconnect the battery and place the new one in. Everything else we just did was for the screen replacement. So once you actually replace or reinstall the grounding clip, you're going to go ahead and reconnect the battery. So if you have the battery in your hand, just fold this one towards the inside of the battery like so, and with your thumb you're going to guide it, making sure you don't move or drop or lose the little grounding clip. I'm going to reconnect it like so. Make sure this little vinyl film is out the way, and then we're going to guide or push the battery towards the motherboard. Make sure that it's flush with the motherboard or as close as possible to it, and then lower it into position, pressing down on it gently in order to make sure that it's adhered with the adhesive behind it. And finally, we just have that one single screw inside of the device, which is for your battery connector. Go ahead and reinstall it. Stop tightening it when your screwdriver stops. Next is we're going to reinstall the back panel. This one, again, when you removed it, it was kind of offset towards the top since we slid it up. I'm going to lower it into position, pressing down on it as you slide towards the bottom of the device. Just using our thumbs, I guess. Same way we removed it. Make sure that it's flush on every side. All right, there we go. So we're going to go ahead and reinstall both of the pentaloop screws. Now that the screws are in place, I do tend to use my finger now. And I kind of like basically put my finger on top of the screw that I'm going to tighten so the magnetism from the screwdriver doesn't lift it up. So I just push basically my finger out the way with the screwdriver and then tighten the screw. Same thing for the other one. All right. Final step, reinstall your SIM card tray. And we're going to boot the device. All right, there we go. Now, the iPhone 4 does take a while to actually boot. So what you guys are going to do is you're going to test for your digitizer functionality. Make sure that all the applications follow your finger. Hold it down until it starts wiggling, and then just basically move it across your screen. Make sure it follows your finger. If it at any moment it drops, basically it could mean that one, either you dropped it by mistake, you lifted up your finger up the display, or two, your digitizer flex is not properly connected. Now, if that's the case, you will have to go back into the video to see how you disassemble the device and make sure that the flex is properly connected. And if you have no display whatsoever, then you have to check the connection for your LCD. If everything is working properly, then basically you have successfully done the repair for an iPhone 4G. So that's it for this video, guys. And well, thank you.